Welcome back to Retro Wednesday, the Titanium Hanger. This is Mike. Today I want to talk to you about either figures or toy lines or certain pieces that are actually rare to find in the wild or even on eBay. But when they show up, they're pretty affordably priced. They're pretty cheap. And I did kind of realize this when I was making some of my videos, that some of these things are hard to find. They're not that expensive. Now, a lot of modern collectors, they think collecting anything vintage is expensive or out of their reach or unattainable. But like this Robin Hood toy line is always a pretty affordable toy line to collect. Some of this other stuff is probably deemed a lot harder to collect. So we'll get into all of this and we'll talk about it. And if you know of any pieces that you're like, that's hard to find, but it's cheap when it pops up, or toy lines that just never pop up but are affordable to collect when they do, I want to do a part 2 of this video. But let's get and take a look at this. I'll tell you what I've found, what I see coming up. First one on my list, and this is not in any real order except the very last one, which I guess would be a number 1. I think I got 10 items on here. The Diamond Toys Commando figures were actually very challenging for me to get a set of those together. But I was very pleased because when I was buying them, they were pretty cheap. Some I got like 3 figures for $30. That made them 10 each. Some I had to pay up $50 a piece. It just is what it is. But at the end of the day, a pretty affordable toy line when the stuff actually does show up. Now, it's showing up very few and far between. I would put several of these figures as very, very rare. But yet, I didn't have to pay a ridiculous amount for any of them. I felt like it was all pretty fairly priced, pretty cheap. And in fact, I'd say 95% of this toy line I got cheaper than Super 7 figures. So yeah, modern collectors are paying more for their stuff in some cases than vintage. But the first one is the Schwarzenegger Commando. And there's 2 scales. There's the 6-inch scale and the 3.75. Next up is last week's Retro Wednesday, which really put this on the map for me, making this video, wanting to talk about cheap toy lines that are rare. See, this stuff was relatively affordable. When you get into the carded, it's a bit more expensive and it's a bit more challenging. But getting it loose, you just have to be patient. It doesn't pop up very often. And so when it does, yeah, I guess you got to just jump on it. But if you look through the histories, they generally, you'll see like a whole set of figures pop up for about $100. Cardeds are all over the place. And so with that, when it is inconsistent like this, it's all over the place. But a fun toy line, and now I think is probably a good time to see some fun collecting with the Flintstones, with the cereal, the Jada cereal ones coming out. Next up is the Mego Love Boat figures. Now, this is actually a double-edged sword. The pendulum's going to swing pretty hard on this one. The figures themselves, I would say they were really easy to get when I collected them. I had no trouble getting them. And then lately they started getting a little harder to find, full complete sets and stuff. And with that, I just kind of noticed that it's not as abundant as it was. And I really think it was that one show, that Odyssey show, Dr. Odyssey or something like that, that kind of rejuvenated people's love for the brand. But you can still get the figures for a relatively affordable price. They don't, well, there's some always on eBay, but I never see them at a toy show. I never see them outside of eBay. So that makes them pretty rare, pretty hard to find. The problem is the boat is almost non-existent. Like, I accidentally lucked into this one, and I haven't seen another one since. So with that, it's kind of what happens a lot of times is you can get the figures real cheap, but you can't get like the playset, and that's a challenge with some of these vintage. But a lot of people just want some figures for a shelf. So this would be a fun, cheap, affordable toy line to collect. Carded ranges anywhere between $200 to $400 for a carded set, and loose anywhere from about $100 to $200. Captain Power is a fun toy line to collect. And overall, it is a very cheap toy line to collect, unless you start getting into the Euro releases and the last two figures. Now, the figure on the very right is Tritor. Tritor itself is a very rare figure. Doesn't pop up very much. But I watched because I had a broken one, and I wanted to get one that wasn't broken. And so I was watching it for a while, and it would pop up for 40 bucks complete. I've seen them incomplete for real cheap, 15 to 20, but complete and unbroken. The problem is the weapons and accessories break. You get broken weapons and accessories. This toy line, same thing with Stingray. Is it Stingray? Stingray. Yeah, he's always kind of pricey. So out of all of them, he's the most pricey. So it's like the third from the right. But on the very far right, Tritor rare. Those two mirror each other in rarity, but yet Tritor is nowhere near as expensive as Stingray. But the whole rest of the line, very easy to get, very cheap and easy to get. Captain Power, fun toy line, very fun toy line to collect. And if you haven't watched the show, it's here on YouTube. Go check it out. I would say the best 80s property that's primed for a reissue or a proper reboot in the theaters. Next up, we have a Turboman doll. I have never seen a vintage Turboman doll in person in the wild ever, and that's funny because a friend of mine popped up and said, "Hey, look what I found for $400." I'm like, "You paid $400 for a Turboman? They made a Turboman?" I thought it was just a prop only. So give props to getting a Turboman, but now prices have fallen on this Turboman doll quite a bit. It is still very rare, but as you can see, you can get them incomplete, vintage 1996. Well, we'll get into this. So the 1996 figure was, of course, based on the figure in the movie that Arnold couldn't get his hands on. But Walmart in 2021 actually put out, through Funko manufactured it, a Turboman doll that looks almost identical to the 1996 figure, which I don't know exactly if it's the same mold or not, so I might look into that. I might do a video about that in the future, but you get a Turboman doll, the vintage ones, the actual vintage ones, from 1996, cheaper because this one exists. And although I have an open mind, I assume all of the accessories would work fine with it, but I might have to check into that also. So that sounds like a fun future video. Anyway, you can get a Turboman doll if you want to, a lot cheaper than you used to. They're still not super easy to find. The irony of the Turboman doll isn't that they actually made it and made it available for sale that you could actually buy back in 1996 and then again in 2021. But there's an even bigger mystery. Something that's even more strange. In the movie, they had oceans, what appeared to be oceans of Brewsters and other things that seemed to be Turboman but weren't Turboman. And the funny thing is, they did make about 25 props for Booster. I thought it was Brewster. It's Booster. And they made about 25 props, maybe 50. But they wanted to make it look like it's a toy aisle stocked full of these things. Those props themselves are worth a ton of money on the secondary market if you get your hands on them. So the flip irony is nobody in the movie wanted the Booster, but in real life today, collectors would love to have one of these and own a piece of history. I would go out and say the Mego Buck Rogers toy line is pretty affordable and cheap, but something I don't see very often. And as working a few toy shows, I didn't see any Buck Rogers at the toy shows I went to. But generally, you got Buck Rogers, you got the little robot, and then you've got the female in there. Those are a little bit more challenging to get. The rest of them, the Tiger Man and kind of the boring ones. Yeah, the boring ones are very, I don't want to say that they're common, but they're cheap. They're just not as expensive as the rest. This whole toy line is relatively affordable nowadays. It was a bit more expensive when I collected it, but of course the playset is always a bit expensive. So I would say if you're interested in Mego Buck Rogers is a good time to buy. And I know a lot of Mego Black Hole is on my list. I think every figure except for the last ones. So you've got the Star, which is a repaint of one of the other figures there, and then you got the Inhumanoid and the droids, a little more expensive. Obviously, the one on the left there is not really a Mego one, but Old Bob is astronomically expensive, along with Inhumanoid is astronomically expensive, but the rest pretty affordable. I mean, and we're talking pushing $20 range, and you might say $20 for vintage toys is a lot of money, but I don't think that it really is. In comparison, it's actually cheaper than what most modern figures are going for these days, whether it's the Super 7 O-Ring Joes, or even when Hasbro was making O-Ring Joes. I mean, they were asking $20. So, I mean, this line, pretty affordable, kind of fun, and it's not very big. I'm going to throw two more Mego toys. I feel like there's a lot of Mego that was on this list. I feel like it was harder to collect, obviously, back in 2021. And I like looking back and going, you know, it would be much easier and more fun and affordable to collect now. Just as in Roscoe, I think Roscoe's the hardest one to get out of all of them. And the most expensive. The rest, the Uncle Jesse figure was reused for another toy line, but I still don't know. I still can't track down what toy line it was in. And I can't search any that show up with it. Everyone puts it as just a variant in here, but I don't see a carded one with a brown beard. Anyway, at the end of the day, still pretty affordable toy line overall to collect. Some of the cards can get kind of expensive, but the figures themselves, pretty simple, cheap, and easy to track down in comparison. I'm not saying you get them for $5 each. Some are going to have to flex to 50 or 60 to get the figure, or you get a whole set for a couple $100 maybe, if you're lucky. But getting the hats and all that kind of stuff, relatively affordable. Still not easy to find, but affordable. And the Mego chips, I saw some people talking about this not too long ago, and basically saying that the motorcycles are getting even harder to get. That was my hardest part, was getting the motorcycles when I collected them. But the figures themselves, very easy to get the figures. You can even get them carded for a relatively affordable price this day and age. But with that doesn't mean that they're all going to be on eBay right now. That means that you're going to have to wait for them to pop up and take your time and collect them and look for them. But a fun, enjoyable toy line and part of 80s. Just Tips was part of the 80s. It was what it was. A lot of fun. Okay, so the last one here, number one, is one particular figure. And it is probably the hardest one to find in all of vintage G.I. Joe. The 94 Kavich exclusive might also be equally hard to find, but it's Slice. But this one isn't an expensive figure. It's a little pricier than the rest of the Shadow Ninjas, but not really an expensive figure when you find him. The problem is just finding him. So in 1994, he was put out in the Shadow Ninjas line. Now, a lot of people aren't real big fans of Ninja Force, but this Shadow Ninjas change colors with temperature, kind of a Zartan-ish thing, and they just kind of turn white. Like, they get pale, and then when it warms up, they warm up a little bit, they get the color back. Or maybe when they're colder, they hold the color. Now I gotta go check how I get that to work. But all of these are pretty easy to get. Even the Snake Eyes are pretty easy to get and affordable to get, except Slice. Now, Slice isn't expensive. He just carries a slight premium over these. But to have the version 3 be more rare than a Starduster, more rare than the gold-headed version of Steel Brigade, to have that rarity, but not the price tag, is really odd. Well, no, it's not really. I lean really hard on the yojo.com for this information, but version 1 was red, version 2 was orange, version 3 was kind of a greenish color change, and the Shadow Ninja. This happens a lot when, in a very short period of time, 1992, 1993, 1994, put out the exact same figure but slight different decos, and it's like, do I need it? 3 different versions in 3 different years? Not really. A lot of kids passed. And the thing is, they knew it, so they produced less in 1994. So the whole line of the Shadow Ninjas is a little harder to get than the versions 1 or the versions 2. And not all of the figures got multiple versions. They got the Shadow Ninjas are reuses of some version 1s. Now, I could research that, I guess, and find that out. But the truth is that when they beat a mold to death in a short period of time, they don't make very many on their last run. There's only one that I see for sale in the US and then one in the UK. This is a $12 figure, but its thumbs are broken. So this is what you see with these Shadow Warriors and Ninja Force a lot. And this picture from the back shows the thumbs a lot better. Still, rare, cheap figure. I don't think there's a better example in the world for a rare, cheap figure, and that's Slice version 3. Now I need your help. I need your help with finding more figures or toy lines that are hard to find. They're kind of rare, but very cheap and affordable. They're not super expensive. They're not like the Lord of the Rings or anything like that, Knickerbocker, or any of those kind of toy lines where you're having to shell out hundreds of dollars a figure. They're affordable, yet on that level of rarity. I'm curious what else is out there. Let me know what you guys think. What did you think about this video? Was this a little bit of fun? Was it interesting? And do you find it helpful for videos like this to find affordable options for vintage collecting? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe. Happy Retro Wednesday to everybody. Tuck your hair out.